Race bans are incredibly rare in Formula 1, with just 5 drivers in the history of the World Championship being forced to sit out a race due to an official FIA sanction. Today in F1, a strict licence penalty points system is in place, meaning if a driver commits enough offences during a 12-month period, a ban is automatically triggered. Some have been close to reaching that limit, most recently Romain Grosjean towards the end of 2018, but so far no driver has received a ban under the new system. Grosjean remains the driver most recently to have served a ban, but we'll come back to him at the end. Our first entry on this list was a ban that had very little to do with F1's authorities at all. Riccardo Patrese, 1978. Young upstart Patrese had rubbed several experienced campaigners up the wrong way by the time of the Italian Grand Prix accident that ultimately claimed the life of Ronnie Peterson. On his arrival at the next race at Watkins Glen, Patrese was informed by Bernie Ecclestone that several leading drivers, including James Hunt, Mario Andretti, Niki Lauda and Emerson Fittipaldi, wanted to teach him a lesson. The drivers blamed Patrese for the Monza accident and told him he would be banned for the American race. They said if he refused to accept what was effectively a vigilante movement from his rivals, they would withdraw instead. Patrese and his Arrows team sought the opinion of a local judge, who assured him he had a strong case to remain on the entry list, but in the end Arrows decided it was for the best to withdraw the Italian's car from the race. Patrese went on to start 256 Grand Prix in his career, a record that stood for nearly 15 years, and he believes today that the situation made him more mature, more determined and a better driver. But he still contests any suggestion that he was a dangerous driver back then who needed to be taught a lesson by the veterans. Nigel Mansell, 1989. More than a decade passed before another driver was banned from a race, and this time it was an official sanction. Mansell was black flagged during the Portuguese Grand Prix for reversing in the pit lane after he locked up approaching his pit box and decided to drive around his mechanics rather than through them. But Mansell insisted he didn't see the black flag, nor a pit board hung out by Ferrari, and he said that if the team also tried to send him a radio message, he was unlikely to have heard it over the sound of his V12 engine while he was battling with Ayrton Senna. Mansell and Senna then collided, putting both out of the race, and the stewards took a dim view of a driver ignoring a black flag and then having an accident with a championship contender. The result was Mansell getting banned for the following race at Jerez, and Ferrari did not field a replacement alongside Gerhard Berger, as it was still trying to contest the decision when the Spanish GP weekend began. Eddie Irvine, 1994. It says a lot about the madness of the 94 F1 season that 3 of the 5 drivers to miss races through a ban suffered that fate during the same tumultuous year. Irvine was the first, initially picking up a 1-race ban for causing a 4-car collision with Jos Verstappen, Martin Brundle and Eric Bernard at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Jordan then appealed the penalty, which resulted in Irvine's ban being extended to 3 races, serving as a warning to teams to think very carefully before challenging FIA decisions. Irvine denied any wrongdoing, pointing out that the 4 cars closed up as a result of Brundle's McLaren breaking down at that moment. He also suspected that his run-in with Ayrton Senna at the previous year's Japanese Grand Prix might have influenced the officials. Mika Häkkinen, 1994. Häkkinen picked up a suspended ban along with Rubens Barrichello for an innocuous-looking last-lap collision at the British Grand Prix, and just a few seconds into the next race in Germany, the Finn triggered that ban by causing a multiple-car shunt at the first corner. Häkkinen spun across the field from the inside after clipping David Coulthard's Williams, with several other cars getting caught up in a race start so messy that some drivers near the back had already collided before they crossed the start line. Häkkinen accepted the penalty even if he felt the ban was a bit harsh, with McLaren deciding not to protest the decision. Michael Schumacher, 1994. Such was the political landscape in F1 in '94, Schumacher ended up serving his ban after Häkkinen, despite the offence in question taking place a race earlier. Schumacher famously overtook Damon Hill on the formation lap at Silverstone and then repeated the transgression following an aborted start. Under the rules at the time, the first offence should have resulted in Schumacher being ordered to start from the back of the grid, but it emerged that the British Grand Prix officials were not aware of that rule, and they too were landed in hot water with the FIA after the event. 13 laps into the race, Schumacher was given a penalty, but there was initial confusion as it was originally announced that he was penalised 5 seconds. That formed Benetton's defence for not calling Schumacher in, as there was no mention of the penalty being a stop-go. However, this was another failure to understand the rules, as it emerged that any time penalty given prior to the final 12 laps of the race had to be served in the pits. Once 7 laps had passed without Schumacher coming in, he was black flagged, which he also ignored, claiming he could only see his number 5 being displayed and couldn't see the flag next to it. Benetton's decision to appeal the verdict meant the case was not heard until after the Belgian Grand Prix, which incidentally Schumacher was also excluded from on technical grounds after taking the victory. His 2-race ban from Silverstone was upheld, meaning he missed the Italian and Portuguese Grand Prix, both of which were won by Damon Hill. Benetton scored just 2 points while he was gone. Jacques Villeneuve, 1997. The exclusion everyone remembers from the 97 F1 season was Michael Schumacher being retrospectively stripped of his second place in the World Championship for driving into Villeneuve at the Jerez decider. But the epic showdown followed on from Villeneuve not claiming his result at the Japanese Grand Prix, where he had triggered a ban for an offence under yellow flags in final practice, but raced under appeal. Villeneuve was one of 6 drivers accused of the offence, including Schumacher, but unfortunately for him, he was the only one with a suspended ban already hanging over his head for 3 previous transgressions. After Villeneuve only finished 5th in the race, which back then was worth just 2 points, Williams decided to withdraw its appeal. That meant the ban was upheld, and Villeneuve has the unusual distinction of having taken part in the race he was banned from. Felipe Massa, 2002. This one was even less of an official ban than Patrese's, but it illustrated a short-lived quirk in the grid penalty system that is so common today. Massa was given a 10-place grid penalty for the US Grand Prix for causing a collision with Pedro de la Rosa at Monza, becoming the first driver to receive that punishment. Back then, such a penalty was only applied to the next race, not the driver's next race, so Sauber decided to avoid having to serve the penalty by replacing Massa with its 2003 signing Heinz-Harald Frentzen at Indianapolis, in a bid to help its Constructors' Championship battle with Jaguar. Romain Grosjean, 2012. Grosjean's incident-packed 2012 season culminated in a race ban following the pile-up he caused at the start of the Belgian Grand Prix. The steward's decision noted that 2 of the drivers taken out in the mess were championship contenders Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, although you'd hope that the severity of the punishment would have been the same regardless of the status of the drivers wiped out in the crash. Grosjean was replaced by Jerome D'Ambrosio for the Italian Grand Prix, and the late Charlie Whiting eventually revealed that Grosjean's chaotic 2012 season was taken into consideration when F1 devised its licence penalty point structure, so a driver having a similar number of incidents would also end up getting a ban. So that's the history of driver bans in F1. Do you think we'll ever see another driver banned under the new system F1 has? And if so, who do you think it'll be?